So we'll start here in the Canada Council backend. Cynthia, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to use you as kind of the audience avatar, and anyone watching, hopefully you'll be in the same position that you're in, starting with the backend. Now, do you already have a Canada Council for the Arts account? Because I'm going to be walking through start to finish from finding the grant opportunity. For people who don't know, Canada Council for the Arts is a government-assisted resource that funds artists and their projects here in Canada. I won't dig too deep into that because I'm starting already in the back end to help people go from finding the grant opportunity to hitting submit, or at least what we'll do is we'll create the first draft of the project. And then the idea, like everything, is you shouldn't really be doing this, on December 31st at 11:59, chances are you won't get the grant because you won't have a strong application if you're rushing it. So I'm going to walk through getting the first draft from start to finish. So Cynthia, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. I'm going to start by clicking Browse Funding Opportunities. Cynthia, you have an account. Awesome. So you are my ideal audience avatar for this workshop presentation thing. So in this case, you can see also they updated the platform. So hopefully this will be a good walkthrough for anyone who's still trying to figure that out. In my case, I am applying for a screenwriting grant as an individual. I am looking for a grant. Profile is all, status open, meaning that they are accepting applications. And I'm just going to apply the filter and see what comes up here. Okay, so I want to filter it down a little more. Artistic practice. Let's go to, where's film? There's film, media, arts, film, video, moving images. Now, one problem I think the platform has is if I check off First Nations, which isn't applicable to me, but official language minority community is, then I think it might actually filter down to programs. Yeah, so this is an example of like, if you click official language minority community, or some of them, they're not like, it really becomes things that are they're designed specifically for that. So you see, if you click the OLMC thing, it's only the market access strategy for official language minority communities fund, which I haven't applied to yet, so I don't want to dig into, but my hypothesis is that that's for, let's say you're an OLMC filmmaker like me in Montreal, meaning that we work in English, even though the majority of the population is French and the majority of funding goes to French artists and French language projects. This is so that you can get funding to, let's say, go to TIFF or Berlin or some other market, Cannes, etc. If you don't mind making the Canada Council screen bigger on the sharing, this will be great. Yes, totally, Cynthia. Thank you. Let me zoom in. Okay. Is that better? All right, so I'm going to hope that's better. Yeah, live feedback's really, really valuable, Cynthia, so please feel free. So I'm going to unclick OLMC, reapply the filter, and sorry, my laptop's kind of in the way. That's why I'm looking over you. And ultimately now we have travel, small scale, short-term projects, long-term projects. So I'm not going to get into this too much because I'm going to artistic creation. Now, from what I've understood from the updates to their programs, artistic creation now covers anything into like anything under, for my case, film. Cynthia, are you also working on a film? And in this case, also, you can see here, step one is always read the program guidelines. Normally, I would actually print this. Awesome. Thank you, Cynthia, for the feedback. I would print this and then sit down with a cup of coffee and read through it and highlight keywords that I identify, such as 75,000 per application, maximum 150 per calendar year. This is one of the reasons why we'll get into project management later. I use Asana, but I also have a pen and paper handy so that I can just write down some of these deliverables and timelines and things like that. And you can apply up to 3 times a year. So theoretically, best case scenario, you apply twice for 75,000. You get them both in the calendar year. but I think you probably still can only have one open at a time. So even if you apply, let's say January 1st, and it takes 4 to 6 months to get it, you could get that 75K in June or July, but then you actually have to execute the project. So you might want to apply again then, but you also have to wrap up the first project before you would be able to take the second one. But, in general, research one and another for short film writing. Awesome. So we're in the same boat. I'm writing for a feature, but this should be pretty useful to you. The thing to also keep in mind is sometimes it's hard to separate what's Canada Council, what's Calc, etc. But generally, you can't apply for the same activity twice. But you can, I believe, apply for a first draft and then a second draft. But you just want to be precise with what you're applying for so that you don't burn an opportunity. Like if you include writing first, second, and third draft for 75K, I think you can do that. But if you write first and second draft and third draft for 25K, then I don't think you can apply for another 25K next year for a second draft or a third draft. This becomes more valuable in production because once you're shooting a film, let's say, you might not want to include film festival applications or traveling to a festival. There, you might want to use that in, let's say, post-production as a separate thing. So anyway, moving on. This is going to be a rough first draft, and then we'll build on it in future presentations, or you can continue on your own. My hope is to just give you some kind of broad overview. So I'm going to open this preview thing in another tab since I don't have it printed out. Artistic creation is part of Explore and Create. Cynthia, it sounds like you already know you're in the right place. You're applying for research, I think you said, and short film writing, so that's in here. The reason I say it's important or I print and highlight is I do try to integrate keywords like experimentation, new approaches, techniques. In this case, I am not including creation in a production sense, though I may use the word developing and creating in the context of screenwriting, but I'm going to be very careful to ensure that it's clear that any deliverable I produce, such as a screenplay, might be creation, but I am making sure that I don't suggest that it includes production in the form of a finished film, which could potentially make me ineligible for applying for the next phase, which would be production, potentially. If it's a feature, 75K, even 150 won't be enough probably to produce the film. So that's where I might want to explore other financing models where Canada Council isn't the only funder. Explore and create, yada, yada, yada. If you already have an account, then you already have been deemed eligible based on falling into one of these groups, such as artists or art workers, etc. Eligible activities, in our case, we're writing, researching, screenplay writing, screenwriting. So that falls into that. And I think we're good. Assessment criteria is also very important. So one key thing is I think when I really started getting grants, it was after I got day jobs at Mattel and Shopify, because I learned that what you're applying for, when they say artistic, they have their own interpretation of that, which is primarily funding your artistic growth and not necessarily is your film idea creative. I think that was a big thing. Previously, I'd always be like, this is why this is such an interesting take on this material. And it's that's not how they interpret the artistic weight. And we'll get into that when we actually start writing the project. Impact, I mean, this is it, artistic practice and career. And feasibility, like in this case, we're doing research and writing. So it'll be highly feasible in theory. It's mostly with their funding, I'll be able to spend more time working on the project. But when we get into support materials, hey, Naina, yeah, I'll get into tips on research before the filmmaking. Let me know if you're asking about fiction or documentary too. That'll help me answer accordingly. And so feasibility also includes, please, can you answer it? Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know if you're fiction or doc. So feasibility can include, like, do you have a team to support you? Like, if we're doing research, is it just me doing research? Do I have the experience doing research, or am I hiring a researcher? So that's where things like filmography come into play. So it's feasibility in terms of time and execution, but also like, can you deliver? And that isn't a yes or no. It's what you present will give them faith, which will inform their um, uh, funding. Okay, so this will become more clear, fictional. Okay, great. This will become more clear when we create an application. So let's go ahead and do that. Apply now. Select applicant type, individual. Select account, so it auto-filled. Great. And there we go. All right, so they reiterate some of the guidelines. Now, third-party access is valuable. I do work with a grant writer who I pay to review my grant. This is, I think, an underutilized feature. A lot of people like send scripts or materials to people via email, and then, let's be honest, my experience is often it gets deprioritized in their lives, which is why I find it valuable to write the first draft myself and then pay someone. I give them access through the third-party access, and then they review everything. And then they do it in like a day. Okay, so any tips on research before filmmaking? I'm going to answer your question while I stop sharing my screen, because for this, I think it's going to display my like address and stuff. So I'm just going to stop that for a second, and I'm going to open that up to make sure I don't put all my personal information on the internet. And so, yeah, research before filmmaking. Yeah, so this is just asking first name, last name, alias, year of birth, citizenship. So that's very clear. You'll be able to move past that. And then it's asking for like mailing address, contact information, social media, website. For that, I'll quickly say like email address obvious, phone number obvious. For social media, I use my YouTube now because my YouTube is now kind of my personal brand. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore. LinkedIn is irrelevant to this demographic. And website, I use IMDb. Mailing address is mailing address. My pleasure, Nina. Nina, feel free to correct me. And now I've moved past the account information. So yeah, I'm going to move on to self-ID now. So if you're pulling that up, we can do that together. Since that's personal as well, I will not share that. So yeah, Nina, first to answer your question about research before filmmaking, the game with all this stuff is the complicated conversation between how much time do you put into developing a competitive application, which requires research and time, versus asking for money and then waiting, fingers crossed, for money and then doing that research. To be honest, now I found I'm more successful when I use what Daniel Priestley calls income follows assets. So basically, I put in the sweat equity, I do the work, and then I hope to recoup. So by the time I'm applying, I usually have a pretty strong application. And while I may include line items for research, I kind of eat that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really, I just feel like that there's research that I have to do to put forward a strong application. If I don't do that on my own, then I probably, or I haven't in the past, got to the money where I'm like, hey, I need this much money to, like, I'm working on a water polo thing. So if I'm saying I need this much money to take water polo classes and go swimming and watch games, I haven't gotten those grants so far. So I've started just applying with like, here's how much I need to write. And then I know that those will be expenses I absorb later. Cynthia, for the self-ID, yeah, so I'm going to fill that out now. Do you want to complete or review your self-identification form at this time? So I would say this is important to fill out, and it will impact your application because this is government money, and theoretically, the reason they're funding, like in the US or other places, people are investing money because they want to make money. So there's what's called an ROI, an expectation of a return on that investment. The reason the government funds programs like this, theoretically, is to get the return on investment is cultural impact. For example, when a Canadian film succeeds at a film festival in France, that makes the country look good. There's a case to be made that this starts to get into propaganda, which is often used with a negative lens, but I'm not going to go there today. So place of birth, Canada, country of birth, year of arrival, you can put all that stuff on your own. I'm going to kind of blast through the self-ID thing. And if you've got it open too, I'm just going to blast through this so that I can show you guys what it actually looks like when we start digging in. So for example, racial and ethnic identity they ask for, they say describe your racial and ethnic identity in your own words. I put brown, and then I checked mixed race. That's my self-identification on that front. I do live with a mental health disability, so I check that off. First language is English. Cynthia, because I know you're in Montreal, but I don't know if you're OMC, and I'm not going to ask you those questions, but I do check off Anglophone, official language, minority. That's a good example of like some of the stuff that does, to your question about impacting your application, it benefits you if you are part of a marginalized group. Theoretically, it's actually hard for them to really action on this, but theoretically, like the CRTC, again, I won't get too in the weeds on the industry stuff, but the Canada Radio and TV Commission does have legal mandates on their requirements, as well as broadcaster requirements on supporting marginalized communities. And I am in support of this because otherwise, like if the government's support systems aren't intended to raise the basement, we have capitalism for that, you know, like if it's just about profit, then it would just be free market economics. So, you know, anyway, that's my opinion on that. So, all right, almost done. So I've submitted my self-ID, complete, and now we get into the meat of things. Oh, is there still more? Okay, applicant profile is the third of 4. Hopefully this is the last, and then I can share my screen again. Okay, yeah, so this is like First Nations, things like that, complete. And finally, here we are at the application form, and I can share my screen again. So, all right, there we go. So here we go. I guess this is the point where I say, if you like the presentation so far, like the video, consider subscribing. And that'll help me know if I should do more of these. Of course, if you have other questions of presentations you might want, like if you don't have a Canada Council account yet, or if you want me to do calc, or I'm applying for SODEC for Créateur Émergente in a couple months, we can do that. So I also don't yet know if people I'm serving are like writers, directors, producers, interested in grant writing, screenwriting, all that stuff. So let me know in the comments, and I'll try to continue to do presentations like this that are relevant for you. So name your application. For the first draft, this is where I'm actually going to be using a real film that I'm applying with for this. So name your application. Let's call this. So there are a couple different ways we can approach this. Sometimes it's the name of the film, like if I don't make this movie, I'll die. And like, don't judge me for like capitalization and stuff. I'm really trying to blast through stuff like that to give you as much value as possible here. And then feature film screenplay. All right, so that's the name of this project, and this will only appear in my dashboard. And now the 1-sentence summary of the project, this is for them. And as you can see, provide your activity and dates. The summary will be used in the Canada Council's official reporting. And this is a great example of like, they're not looking for a log line of what the movie is about. they're looking for a log line of what your project, and not project like film, project like the project they're funding, which is your activity of writing the film. What that means is it'll be something like funding to write a feature. I could even say a first draft of a feature film screenplay from 06/26 to 12/26. First draft, we can keep revising stuff like this. But my goal with sessions like this is like in an hour, I want to have all the first draft of stuff in, and then I can revise. I'll sleep, I'll take a break, I'll work on other stuff to make money, and then I'll come back to this in a day or two. Choose the artistic practice that most relates. Okay, there it is. Media arts, film, moving image. Choose the type of activity you are proposing. They love experimentation. Research, to your point, Nina, that is where I'll click that. Artists and community collaboration, I am going to click that because I'm going to hire a story editor to review my work and potentially grant writer, etc. I will put creation of artistic work because of the screenplay. I'm not sure if I'm going to put production of an artistic work. Let me just, and this is where, okay, so we'll double check how they're now describing, and always double check because they revise this stuff all the time. So here, transforming your idea into a final artistic work ready to be shared with the public. So that's a great example of, I will not include that because that is likely how they're interpreting shooting the film. Public sharing of artistic work. This option must include at least one of the activities above. And this is also like doing stuff like this. I am trying to generate revenue models to sustain me as an artist so I can do less corporate work. So I will be sharing more of my journey as a screenwriter on YouTube, but I'm not going to communicate that as a public sharing of artistic work because they're old school. If I click this, they're thinking about like film festivals. So it's always this game of, it's considered an empathy exercise, but it's this game of like, who am I talking to and how are they using these words? So even though, yeah, like they don't consider YouTube in any way legitimate, it's not a broadcasting platform, etc. So I will not be checking that off because I don't want to potentially put myself in a position where they won't fund, let's say, when I eventually fund for money to submit to film festivals, if they say you've already gained support for the public sharing of artistic work, then they might consider those line items in the budget ineligible. So start date. Cool. I'm just going to finish up this page, Cynthia, and then I'll answer your question. So always, and this will become more clear too when we get into the list of activities and timelines, but as they say somewhere here, it's going to take 4 to 6 months. So today's the 18th of February, so 2, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. So let's say preliminarily July 8th, I would start, and let's say I would want to submit the final thing for like, I don't know, let's say December 8th, 7th. We'll make it like, what is that? August, September, October, November, December. That's 5 months. So let's go with that for now. And again, I'm just going to blast through this first draft to help you guys out, and then I'll revise this before I submit. Cynthia, I was in doubt about the experimentation one because it involves new technologies and things like that. No. So if I'm not experimenting new ways of doing my projects, how will I explain that later? So I guess it's my belief that in theory, you should always be conducting some form of experimentation, and it does not necessarily need to be technological if that's what you're focusing on, like in film and in research and screenwriting. Like you might want to include something like I've been using the free version of Celts or Celts or whatever it is, and with your funding, I will be able to buy a license to a professional software like Final Draft or a monthly subscription to Arc Studio Pro, which is what I use, this will give me an opportunity to grow as a screenwriter. That could be an example of experimentation. Another one would be, with your support, I will finally be able to hire professional actors for table reads, which will help me develop the dialogue and characters. That will be an experiment that I would run that would be new to me with your support. It could be, I have never worked in, like right now I'm writing a horror film, like separate from what I'm going to be writing about now. So maybe you've only done comedy, or let's use me as an example. I've never done like a comedy. So maybe experimentation could be experimenting with a new genre. Let me know if that helps answer your question, Cynthia. So if I'm not experimenting new ways of doing my projects, how will I explain that later? Does that make sense? Okay, so your proposed activities. So for this first draft, again, to be efficient with time and not focus too much on prose and spelling, this is where, again, on the right here, you can see helpful information. Really just answer the bullet points, right? So what exactly are you planning to do? I will, let's just say, with your support, I will spend the next 5 months following the confirmation of receipt of funding from Canada Council for the Arts, writing a feature film screenplay. Awesome. Thanks, Cynthia. Okay, if that was helpful, boop that like button. What is the artistic? So here I'll tell you guys, you already know, if I don't make this movie, I'll die. Actually, I changed the title. I'll die if I don't make this movie. That's, again, I'm just trying to get it out, and I would, it's so easy to get caught up on like little things that the goal really is, let's keep moving. Is a, again, this is a not great for, it's a meta-fictional, auto-fictional, satire, body horror film about a filmmaker who hasn't made a film in a long time, and after, again, this is just the not great first draft, after learning that people are making fun of him for not really being a filmmaker because he has a day job or makes corporate videos or is on YouTube, he goes to a, I'm going to call them a witch now, but basically, and makes a deal to, basically makes it, it's kind of like a Stephen King Thinner situation. So the idea is, this very much, right now the protagonist's name is Gavin, and so basically Gavin gets cursed. It's kind of like a Pinocchio story, kind of like Pinocchio, and suddenly every time he calls himself a filmmaker, his body deteriorates more and more. Realizing this, he is forced to make a film by any means, The film explores imposter syndrome in the changing landscape of the film industry in the age of digital platforms, and how I'm struggling to identify, I don't know, existentially as a filmmaker whose primary sources of revenue aren't film, and getting into platforms like YouTube, which makes me worry I'm not a real filmmaker, as Pinocchio would say, a real boy. Shame, judgment, guilt, blah, 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 blah. All right, so now you guys know what my movie's about. And so what is your artistic or cultural rationale for your activities? So I kind of got into it there, but so I'm actually going to separate that and put that as a new bullet point. All right, so they say, what is your artistic or cultural rationale? Da, 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 da. So this film is a mirror for what I'm going through and the film industry. All right, so what are some of your inspirations? Some of my inspirations for this one are, and okay, so here's another example of like the difference between your inspirations and what inspirations will they understand / what will they be looking for. So in my mind, this film is going to be pretty run and gun, very much like Nirvana, the band, what is it? The band, the show, the movie. For its kind of ragtag, pseudo, meta, auto-fictional narrative. And I'm going to leave the typos in to, again, just try and communicate that you need to just get comfortable getting it out. The substance is another one, but like, this is a great example of if I just say the substance, they're going to say like, there's no way you're going to be able to make the substance with $75,000 or $30,000 or $100,000, right? So what are some of my other examples? So you want to balance kind of the dream you have for the screenplay with the feasibility component that we talked about. What's another metafictional? There's some other ones where like artists play themselves. Because basically my idea for this film would be that I would actually act in the film as a fictional version of myself, Gavin. Okay, let's leave that at that for now. The other thing you can do is kind of like try and communicate why these are your inspirations and references. So I could say like Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie for its ragtag, da, 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 focusing on Montreal and the actual landscape of the film scene here. And then I'll say like structurally, the substance in terms of how the protagonist begins to deteriorate physically after making the deal / pact / getting cursed. And yeah, let's leave it at that for now. So does your proposed work include taking risks? If so, how? This one's actually really important. I am a believer that, like, going back to that whole art versus propaganda thing, I think artists, if you're not taking a risk, then it's unlikely you're really making art. That's a pretty extreme binary sentence, but what I mean by that is they theoretically do want to fund, when they say artistic practice or artistic growth or experimentation, that's another way to interpret it. So how does your proposed working include taking artistic risks? Even being on YouTube is a huge artistic risk for a filmmaker right now. Now, you can believe this or not, but that's the whole point of pitching yourself as an artist and pitching your project as an artist. It is kind of like what you're feeling. I do feel like people could judge me because I'm on YouTube. Like it's like another version of film and TV and what people respect in a way, or not even respect, but expect. So even being on YouTube is a huge artistic risk for a filmmaker right now. It's seen as lesser than or not as elite or prestigious, etc. Obviously, I'll fix this later. This film is a representation of my own angst and existential internal struggle with trying to grow, evolve, survive, and make it as a filmmaker in a medium that is arguably dying, but definitely not sustainable financially. Yada, yada, yada. So yeah, that's my biggest risk. Anyway, Cynthia, those questions are very hard to answer when the project is a research for a TV series. I don't believe Canada Council for the Arts funds TV series. How would you approach that to have a strong description? So first of all, check if they fund TV series or digital series, but I don't think they do. And one of the reasons for that is because I believe, and again, this changes all the time, so depending on, I could be wrong, or they could have changed it, or maybe by the time someone else watches this recording, it could have changed. But my understanding is most of the arts councils consider it, ultimately it comes down to, they consider the director the artist. So the thing that they might bump on is if you're writing a TV series, yeah, right off the bat, it might not be what they consider an eligible project. But also, I guess in their defense, it would be because the question would be, well, are you going to direct it? How can you guarantee that? Are you going to produce your own TV series? I wonder if they accept web series yet, because I could see how web series, they could understand how an artist could guarantee kind of directing a web series because of the scope. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about how that lands with you. I imagine it might be a hard thing for you to hear about the TV series. Look, low key, you could pitch it to them as a film. I mean, that could be even the experimentation or risk. You could pitch it as a film and pitch that, yeah, like if they don't accept TV series, like you could pitch it as a film, basically, or another research project and not mention TV, and then use the money to conduct the research. And who knows? I mean, that's kind of the thing is, and probably to your point, like what's so hard about this is trying to figure out how to like sell them something like a product by giving them confidence in an outcome, when the whole point is what you're funding is a form of exploration. They're not ignorant to that. Like the program is called Research and Exploration, or Explore and Create. So that's why the game is figuring out, yeah, how to put them in, how to position this in a way that allows them to hopefully advance you. So yeah, and I mean, to be honest, like that water polo thing I mentioned earlier, it started as a film, and then we got into a development program with Rezo out of BC, and they brought us to BC and Hong Kong to pitch, and then potential investors from mostly Asia were like, have you thought about this as a series? And so and LA, so we developed it as a series, but then no one took it, and now it's back to being a film. So that's like a real world example of like how intellectual property and ideas can gestate. All right, moving on. Why is your project important at this time? So here I'm going to say important for me, and then important for, I don't know, I'm going to say society. I cannot spell society. All right, so important for me, I think I am a canary in the coal mine of sorts, in that I'm a filmmaker trying to survive in a world that is changing and structures are not modernizing. Especially here in Quebec and Canada. Like, this is a first draft. I don't know if I'll keep talking ish about the government here, but the government funds, how do I want to say this? This is an example. I mean, what we're talking about with film and TV. Films, but films don't make money. This cognitive dissonance is a conundrum, which I'll simplify later for me, exploring it through this allegory, yada, yada. Okay? Important for society, I'll say, like, I'm saying society because what I mean is, like, how would someone from Canada Council who's worried they get fired if they fund the wrong project be able to tell their boss, like, oh, here's why this project will be valuable for cultural impact? So this project represents the existential crisis I think many of us feel, especially when content is for global audiences, but so many structures are based in physical geography. This project represents a conversation that is not being had right now. And I think it's because artists are scared to talk about it out of fear the funders will hold it against them. Meanwhile, the social stigma of these platforms, in my opinion, holds us back from, to our conversation, Cynthia, experimentation, to try to destigmatize so we can find solutions. As the protagonist, Gavin, body disintegrates and he comes up with schemes in the Orwellian art funding system. He has to face those challenges and create his new body form Kafka-esque. So you can see, like, even on a first draft, some of this is just like ideas, like they're not even sentences. We'll work on that later. I think it's just important to get to the finish line. Also, I haven't saved in a while and I'm talking a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and save. I Control A to select everything, copy it just in case that didn't work before hitting next as well. So, all right, what other questions do we have to answer? Why is your project important? What are the potential artistic outcomes you hope to achieve? All right, so I have worked in fiction, doc, and now YouTube. This and YouTube. This project is an experiment in growing artistically, leveraging all those genres. The output will be a first draft of a screenplay. That's simple. What I found out is they don't fund, oh, you probably mean don't fund TV series meant for commercial broadcasting. Yeah. Now, the question is, if you are tied to your idea being serialized, then, I mean, you could try figuring out what they mean by commercial broadcasting, because if they will accept a series for digital that you self-produce and self-distribute, then maybe you could still apply. That's why it's always like, what are the rules of the game? How are these people using those words? What's their interpretation of these words? Like, I would think they're saying commercial broadcasting because what they don't want, and this is fair, is for an artist to have, for them to give money to an artist to develop intellectual property that then you basically like option to a production company for $1, you know? That sucks for everyone involved. The output will be a first draft of a screenplay. Through this, I will learn more about my own imposter syndrome, fears that are holding me back from growing as an artist. Also, what did I want to say here? Oh, because I intend to play myself in this fictionalized version, this will also make me a better writer and director. I don't know, let's say through acting classes, which I've already been taking for about 3 years since doing some at the, so here I'm going to be braggadocious and name drop at the TIFF lab, and through that learned I would benefit as a director from taking acting classes. What are your potential outcomes? How will this contribute to you or your group's artistic development? Okay, so Christina, sorry. I think it's Christina. Cynthia, sorry, way off. Sorry, my brain's in a few places right now. All right, how will this contribute to you or your group's artistic development? As a brown OLMC filmmaker, actually, I think this is the most scary thing about doing YouTube Lives is like, these are first drafts of ideas. So I'm throwing in these like identity politics keywords. Actually, that reminds me, well, should I say, like, I actually don't like using the term Anglophone because I'm bilingual, but progress takes a lot of time. Right now, we're in an era where to be more inclusive of the pluralistic identities of Canada, we're using the terms Anglophone and Francophone. Bilingual isn't really a thing. And anyway, without getting too deep into that, as a brown OMC filmmaker from Montreal, I've never seen someone like me on the screen in Quebecois cinema. From the, let's say, communities featured in the film to the actors like myself and my community in lead roles, this will show a real, I don't know, people of Montreal that have been previously erased through exclusion. Again, first draft. How will this contribute? Oh, also, I'll say I'll be hiring name as a story editor who has extensive experience in thing. This is something I do a lot when I just know I need placeholders, protagonist, name, thing, like anything that keeps the fingers typing. Contribute. They will help me grow in this new skill, and your funding allowing me to secure these resources will be significant. All right. For the community's growth. Does your project include any accessibility measures for artist or audience? If so, what are they? So in this case, as a person living with a non-visible disability, I have invested a lot of time into tools and tactics and community to grow, yada, yada, yada. And I disseminate my learnings, knowledge, and work with community partners and consultants in these fields, and mentor at the NSI producers, what is it, Disabled Producers Lab, Producers Lab, yada, yada, yada. So there we go. Who are your intended audiences or communities? So this is a great example of like the real disconnect between what Canada Council for the Arts might think of as an audience versus what might be a market in like commercialization terms. And trying to find the balance is complicated, which is why so much of this is like, get the first draft out, sleep on it. Do you think it's okay if we don't have the artist names? Yeah, exactly, totally. That's why I'm putting in this placeholder for like, I'll be hiring name. I have a few people potentially in mind, but I don't know for sure yet. It will be in the budget, and I thought I could add hiring in the timeline. Yes, you totally can. Having said that, this is a great example of how you can really make sure you get those 20% feasibility points by sending out an email asking someone who you think could be doing that role if you could include them in the application, totally non-committal, and ask them for a resume, include their resume in the supporting materials, which we'll get to, and then that way they can check that box that say Cynthia has the self-awareness to know that she needs the support of this person, and she has mentioned this person, which makes it even more feasible and clear that you have a vision for how to execute the project. And she has their resume, which likely means that she confirmed their interest in supporting, which means that this is already more feasible, and that strengthens your application and makes you more competitive. but that's a great example of like Nina asked the question about like, where do you include research? How much research do you have to do? Like in a way, that's research. Or like you said, you'd have hiring in the budget and timeline. But if you kind of soft hire or position that you've soft hired, or you have a list of candidates and rosters and support, you'll have a more competitive application. And I guess to further that, like everyone I know who's gotten money has essentially had all of that at this stage. And that goes back to the incomes follows assets, where it's like you'll be more likely to get money if people have more confidence that the money will be used efficiently and clearly. All right. Accessibility, intended audience or communities. So this is where I would say like, okay, for representation, see above. For the final audience, that would be funders for production who, such as insert funders who would align, and the final film markets and audience equal X. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm like, okay, this is, I think, kind of how I'd answer the question from those three lenses. And I'll keep working on that later. How will you engage with your intended audience or communities? So engage with your intended audience or communities. Like at research and screenwriting phase, here I would say something like, as a member of REMC, QEPC, UPPCQ, deeply embedded in these communities. The challenge is funding to hire them as collaborators. That's where you come in. That's the only missing piece. Again, this is very kind of casual conversational versions of this. How will your project benefit artists, participants? Oh, we got 8 viewers now. This is peak viewership. Like that, like the video if you're enjoying being here. Still getting used to that call to actions and stuff. Let me know in the comments if it's annoying. How will you engage with your audience? How will your project benefit artists, participants, audiences, and communities? Just this. Oh, yeah. So that's the thing. So with film, with revolutionary films like Iron Lung, now Iron Lung and Nirvana, now breaking all the rules of traditional distribution and the star system, particularly with the cognitive dissonance between how Canada simultaneously doesn't really have a star system, but seems to believe that would solve the problems. This is very much a first draft, but I don't think so. Not in today's world. This film explores this, and I expect both the film and YouTubing about the film being a significant driver in this conversation, and hopefully inspiring all of us to be more experimental with our approaches to to filmmaking in Canada and here in Montreal, Quebec. Let's throw a race card in here, especially for marginalized groups who don't have a seat at the table anyway. We need to build a new table. This film is representation of this complicated thing. Whatever. Cynthia, do you think it's okay if we have the artist names? Will be in the budget. Yeah. Thanks for, I don't know how to say that emoji, the laugh emoji. Let's leave it at that. How will your project benefit artists? Are you addressing any broader social issues such as environment or, yeah. So that's probably already captured. This is good enough. Moving on. Save and next. So I'm going to keep going through this, but hopefully that, so also I'll say that I think they changed it. Now it's just like activity description, 7,000 words or characters, whatever it is. And it's all kind of in one place. You want to kind of answer those questions. And yeah, I think that's kind of a new approach. Do the activities include First Nations? Not at the moment. Do your activities include working with intellectual property? No, not at the moment. I don't think so. Again, I'm just blasting through this because, and there's additional important reading material. Just blasting through this because I'll revisit it later. I'm not going to waste your time with me doing research. Capacity and experience to carry out the activities. Have you carried out similar activities in the past, and what activities have prepared you to undertake this work? This, once again, is one of those complicated governmental double-sided questions where they want you to tell them how this will be like a revolutionary artistic thing, while also giving you confidence that you can execute because you've done it before. So I have, let's say, I have made X fiction shorts, Y docs, and Z YouTubes. I have won awards. And then it feels so weird talking about this type of stuff with an audience, but okay, this is how you have to sell yourself. Like, I have won a Writers Guild Prize for Screenwriting, short director award at the oldest festival in Canada. It's also the oldest, it's Yorkton. It's also the oldest festival in North America and the Americas, but this is a good example of, because I'm writing to Canada Council, I'm going to say Canada. If it was US, I'd say North America. If it was international, I'd probably still say North America. I think no one really talks about the Americas. And awards producing. I'm going to say self-producing here. I'm currently writing a feature horror film with funding from Canada Media Fund. So this would be my, I'm gonna change this. I'm currently writing, but by the time this goes in, I've written a feature horror film with funding, Media Fund. So this would be my second feature screenplay. I'm not directing that one, though I'm producing. So this would be my first feature as a director. So the reason I'm saying this is like, yeah, trying to find that balance between like, I can totally do this, here's all the proof, but then they'll say like, well, then why do we need to give you money? Like, how are you going to grow? What's the experiment? So also I'm positioning me as a director, and this potentially being my first feature as a director, which would be like a huge growth thing. So that's what also they would be investing in. If I, to your point, Cynthia, too, about if you have an artistic or presenting collaborator partner, do they have relevant experience? How will they help you successfully carry out a project? Have they confirmed? So here I might, excuse me, I will be hiring name who, as a story editor, who has experience in this genre, to also help on the directing side as I ideate on execution while writing. Actually, maybe I'll even say, to be honest, that one is looking really expensive, and I have no idea if it will actually ever get made. This one is much more feasible as it's guerrilla style with me as the lead actor too. And yeah, blah, 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 blah. This is much more micro budget indie. How will they help you successfully carry out your project? Okay, so anyway, that's like an example, Cynthia, of how valuable it is to have some people on your team secured, and have they confirmed their participation in your project? Yes, they have confirmed participation, and their resumes are attached. Another example of where you might want to have partners is like if you're applying for production, you as an artist may want to hire a production company to execute. Unlike things like SODEC, where the production company would have to own your IP, with an arts council, you own the IP and you're expected to produce. I own a production company, so I can actually hire my own production company to produce, and there's no conflict because it's still the artist that owns the IP and is producing. But this is why there's like a mistake often with in Quebec where people say, oh, you can't hire a production company. You can, as long as you own the company. Is it a liability? Hey, Noah, how you doing? Is it a liability to include commercial experience? I would say probably yes. If you wrote on a commercial TV series for a broadcaster or option a film, would that experience be an asset or a liability? Like most things in life, it's probably an asset and a liability. I would say it can be an asset if you have a project that you're not confident you will have a strong like competitiveness on, then it would be an asset. I would say maybe think about like not including as many. So you could position like, let's say I was working on an animation fiction film. I have only done that at Mattel, toy company. So I might not want to communicate that I have executive produced or show run 300 episodes of kids content, but I might want to mention one series that is related so that I can basically prove like I can do animation, but I don't want them to think that I am an animation director. Hope that helps, Noah. Let me know if you have any follow-ups or if you have a specific example. Knowing a little bit of your work, hopefully that's kind of a relevant example. But I think in general, yeah, they like for you to be, what you're pitching yourself as is an artist, if whatever that means. Examples can include community partners, producing partners, presenters, exhibitors, publishers. Community partners is probably particularly important if you're dealing with sensitive subject matter like mental health, mental illness, If you're working with people from marginalized communities, they'll likely want cultural consultants. Producing partners is a good example of like, you can include producing partners. Yeah, there's a misconception here in Quebec particularly that you can't, but what they're really talking about is you need to continue to own your intellectual property. Presenters, exhibitors could be distributors. You could have a distributor on board. Publishers probably isn't relevant necessarily for film. And make sure you're ensuring safe and fair working conditions. That's great. And public health, I think that got added due to COVID. Does your project involve artistic or presenting collaborators? Yes. And then here you can add more, blah, blah, blah. Right now I don't have any, but I'll find some to strengthen my application. Oh, best advice always is work towards having an application that someone could read in 10 minutes, including supporting materials, which Hemingway writing app. This is a great tool. I'll post it in the chat. You can copy your content into that, and it will grade you and grade your complexity level of your content, and then you can try to get down to a grade 3 to grade 7 level. The other thing I try to remind myself of is many people are often reviewing in their second language. So using a tool like that to simplify. I don't suggest AI in a lot of these scenarios. I use a lot of AI in my life and work, but not for some things. Like simplify, something like this. It's kind of like you need to learn stuff. So it's figuring out, when do I just need to do something and when do I need to learn something so I could do something better? Hemingway's a good example of like, I can be very verbose. So, I mean, I was even more verbose, 5 years ago. So apps like Hemingway have allowed me to continue learning how to simplify my language. If I just keep being verbose into an AI and then tell it to simplify, then I'm not going to get better at communicating. What is your project timeline? Okay. So number one mistake people make is, or I guess number one easiest thing to do, whenever you apply, add 6 months, how long it takes them. I have to double check what their latest projections are, but figure out when you expect to get it. Like I think we talked about earlier, might be July 2026. And then add however much time. I'm going to put like December 2026 because I want to apply for another grant in December. So I always try to get those 2 to 3 submissions in line with the calendar year or the year of the organization. So I always have a few in, and then you can basically break it down from your general timeline into 3 months for treatment, 1 month revision with story editor, then, I don't know, maybe research, hiring, or some of the tasks that you guys mentioned. And then, let's say 1 month revision. And then again, like you could keep it pretty simple, but you may want to continue to increase their faith and feasibility by saying things like, the 3 months is based on a framework that I developed teaching screenwriting. And then I might say like, I proved this works on my previous feature screenplay. I expect this will take the same sort of thing. Yeah, that's fine. Let's say if it takes longer, then I will delay other successful grants. I don't know if I'd say that. I'll leave it for now. All right, completing the budget. I think this is pretty straightforward. If you guys want to dig into that, we'll do it in another session because the budget is like its own thing. It's not complicated, but actually, you know what? I can probably do this pretty quick in this case. So I'm probably going to ask for something like 30,000 because I'm going to go to the Writers Guild of Canada minimum rate for treatment / first draft. And then I can just go to expenses, professional fees, $30,000. This is, again, first draft. Money for Gavin. There we go. Now, on the next draft, obviously, I will include a story editor fee. I will do my research. I'll identify anything else. But like, theoretically, it can be that simple. As an example of, yeah, and they have more details here on things like travel and what's eligible and what's not eligible. As an example of being careful for those in Quebec, like Canada Council, pretty straightforward. In Quebec, they ask for like weekly rates, which is dumb. So I realized the way to override that is you actually just put in a rate like 30,000 for 1 week. And they're like, what? And then it forces them to read the note where you communicate that you're benchmarking against this flat fee or whatever. So it's kind of, that again is a good example of always trying to figure out like what is the platform telling me in terms of how they perceive the rules of the game to be. Any other information that'll help us understand your application? This is where you might, like they say, regional context or cultural context. And specific needs could be accessibility, but that's a little bit redundant with the mention of accessibility at the beginning, but I might say something like, again, as a brown OLMC person living with a non-visible disability, yada, yada, yada. But you don't want to be redundant. So I think actually maybe what I put here is like, I think I might even focus on as an OLMC person less than, don't quote me on this. I got to double check the latest numbers before less than 5% of funding. I might say over 80% of funding is invested in Montreal, but less than 5% is invested in OLMC artists, and even less when BIPOC is considered. I believe this project aligns closely with Canada Council's mandate to support marginalized artists like me. Save and next. All right, so this is the last section and one of the more complicated ones, but it doesn't have to be. If you remember, this is probably the most overwhelming one for me, but just remember that you're trying to put together an application that someone could digest in 10 minutes or less. So it can be tempting to say like, oh, maximum of 10 files, maximum 500 megs, but you actually want to keep this pretty tight. So again, I'm not going to like dox myself with private info, but I'll tell you my resume, what I'd probably do for something like this is resume to prove that I'm an award-winning filmmaker. Basically social, just to, that BS stuff. I do keep my resume to 1 page. I will keep my resume to 1 page for this, so it's nice and tight. I don't want people to accidentally read things that are lower priority. I want them to see award-winning director. I want them to see award-winning writer. Producing will be deprioritized. And I do like, I have a second page that's testimonials. I think this is pretty unique, and you're welcome to steal it. I have Oscar nominee who gave me, I produced one of his short films. And so I have like testimonial, Gavin is great, from this guy, Oscar nominee. I have another one, Gavin is great, from this Emmy nominee. I have Gavin's great from this Telefilm Talent to Watch filmmaker whose project I served as a story editor on. I have Gavin is great from someone who was at South by Southwest. So I don't know how many people use testimonials. It's a very common business tactic. I haven't seen many artists use it, so feel free to give it a try. And for the required audio-visual material, again, it says up to 10 files with a maximum size of 500 megs. I would again recommend that you be selective and not just like, here's what I think is the coolest stuff I've done. Maybe this answers your question a little bit too, Noah. But this is the stuff that proves that I can and will execute this project and that my artistic voice is aligned with this. So for example, the reason I say this is from my filmography, I'm pitching a movie that is like a meta-fictional body horror pseudo-doc. So what I might do for this is collect 5 one-minute clips from my work and package them into a 5-minute montage of these 5 bits. I might even do an on-camera thing like this where I say, hey, jury of the Canada Council for the Arts, thanks so much for reading my application for I'll Die If I Don't Make This Movie. It's a very specific and unique new genre I'm playing with. So I want to give you a sample, a tapas platter, if you will, of a few of my works that do speak to my artistic voice and collectively how they'll be driving my continued growth as an artist with this project. First up, here's an example. Here's a clip from Followers, my horror comedy that premiered at Fantasia and was available on CBC Gem. And then I'll show that to show that I have experience at a, depending who you talk to, Fantasia's A tier or B tier. I think in the industry it's considered B tier, but in genre it's definitely A tier. For me, it's A tier. I love it. So it has the social proof that it was at Fantasia. It was on CBC Gem, so I'm communicating that it was validated by a broadcaster. And basically, very quickly, I'll show a clip or two with the guy's arm getting broken to show that I have experience in horror comedy and body horror. Then I'll show something from Brotherly, which is much more personal, because typically people just consider drama to be like more prestigious or elite or whatever. So I'll show that. And then I'll probably show a clip maybe from a documentary thing I hosted that's on my YouTube page from last year, where I challenge like white supremacy in the industry and stuff to show that I also work on camera and show how I can mesh. And then maybe I'll even show a YouTube clip or something to show that that I do some performance or how this existential crisis of like, can I be a filmmaker and on YouTube? I don't know. So I might cut that up so that kind of, because what I want is that when they open that link, one link, it's very clear what I'm trying to tell them. And so I might do a 5-minute thing so they open it and maybe they even are relieved that it's not another 10-minute thing that they have to watch. And maybe by talking with them, it could be more engaging and I get to position more clearly. Another thing I really like to do is if I'm doing on-camera video pitches, then I do subtitles at the bottom. Again, audio quality can be tricky. People might be watching in their second language, and it's just another visual thing that keeps them engaged. I mean, like we all know from social media. So that's another little trick that I haven't seen anyone do. Cynthia, talking to a Calc representative, she told me to not do a demo reel, but to send the entire movie. I did, and tell the jury frame range I want them to watch. If not, they will watch the first. I don't know if that would apply for Canada Council as well. Cynthia, you might already know how I feel about bureaucrats. They tell you all sorts of stuff. What I care about is what works. I don't know if I told you, but like, I think, anyway, I got into a program at Berlinale, definitely an A-tier festival, one of the top in the world. The calc rep said I had no chance because in less than 4 weeks, I didn't have the support materials. Anyway, I got in. I try to use data. I find the bureaucrats, they only know what they know. They give you advice based on their opinions. Like not do a demo reel. Okay, if I try to think about what they might have been telling you that would have value, I would say, I would agree that you should probably not do like a 2-minute demo reel, like the way that most people do demo reels, which is like a series of images. Because if you're applying as like a director or screenwriter, okay, maybe it's the difference between demo reel. What I'm suggesting I might do is like a video pitch / montage of clips so that I have the opportunity to position and frame why I'm submitting the clips. Maybe it'll be a title card in the end. Because I would agree that you don't want like a 2-minute series of shots. That doesn't really support that you're a great director or a great writer. So maybe that's a version of that feedback that might be valuable. Does that make sense? Versus like, you can put, they're telling you what the maximum is. And that's like what's cool about Canada Council, I found they're much more self-aware of what they're asking for. So they're saying you can do 10 files, maximum size of 500 megs. That's a good constraint because actually 500 megs, if you're submitting an 80p material, it's really up to 10 minutes. So if you respect that, which you'll have to when you upload, that'll kind of inform. And that's why even you might want to do a test, like test a 500 meg file. Like my short film Brotherly, the 9-minute version is 1.3 gigs. So when I submitted for something in December, I had to compress it down to 500 megs. That was very aligned thematically. So I just uploaded that film. So yeah. And then short description. Again, everything you write in here adds the time you're asking people to spend, which if the time is more, lowers the likelihood that they'll consume it all. So that's all part of the game. Oh, things like passwords. It's another blocker. Like if something goes wrong with the link, person is on Safari instead of Chrome, I don't know. I really try to avoid what in business is called friction, like as frictionless as possible. The goal is to make it easy for them to check as many boxes as possible, as quickly as possible. Exactly, probably that's why. Yeah, in 3D animation and VFX, we looked at the shots and image qualities of the demo reels. That's why we need one, but in Grant's case, yeah, exactly. In fact, like I'm redesigning my website and the way we're approaching it, it's like I'm not doing a demo reel. We're doing this thing where it's like a continuous scroll forwards and backwards. So if you go to gavinseal.com, you'll land on me, and it'll as you scroll, it'll become intersectional and then go back to Gavin. If you go to intersectionalfilms.com, it'll go to that module. And then if you scroll back, it'll be almost like the about us of the company, but it's the same material in the website, but it's the idea from the guy was that it's like a film reel, but you can kind of enter the experience either from Gavin, the person, or intersectional films, the company. So it satisfies both demographics. The reason I shared that is there's no demo reel, because what I want is that each potential audience, whether it's an arts council or a traditional funder, the experience and the content that they get served brings them down funnel to satisfy their need to check things off. And I would say it's the same with content. And yeah, the challenge with like a shot reel type demo reel is, okay, somehow, somewhere you're taking some credit for those shots. Does that give me confidence that you can write this feature-length screenplay? Not necessarily. You could also include written materials, by the way, here. So if you're submitting for like research or writing, you can include a screenplay. Just be aware that like a 10 or 15 page, it says maximum 20 pages, but like they're funding filmmakers, which in their interpretation means directors. So if you submit like a 20 page screenplay, I've served on juries for film festivals. I've never served on a jury for an arts council, but like, it's tough. If I get a 20-page screenplay, that needs to be a killer screenplay top to bottom for me to still have time for that person to read the pitch deck or watch their reel. So yeah, just be wary of that. Like I, for a feature, would likely submit like a treatment maybe, and then like a 5-minute clips. I don't know. Iterative design. This is the first time I'm prepping this application, so give me a little grace. And then that's it. Declaration, submit, and there we go. That's been just over an hour. I apologize for the technical difficulties off the top. If you're still here, I hope you like the video. Boop that like button. Subscribe if you're not already. Let's take some questions. Stop sharing. Hopefully that was pretty interactive. If anyone wants to leave any other questions in the chat, any topics that you might want for the next one that I'll do in a couple weeks, let me know. Easy. Yeah. I'll clean this up and it will be available to watch on demand. I got to figure out why Riverside wasn't connecting to the link that went out earlier. Iterative design, figuring stuff out. Hey, Edmund. Edmund is a producer of Skinamarink, which actually I finally watched last week and is pretty spectacular. Fascinating what you guys did. That might be one of my references for this movie. Because I saw Iron Lung in theaters with someone, Edmund, who is a huge fan of your film Skinamarink. And so he reminded me that I hadn't seen it. And yeah, great work. Really creepy. I, to be honest, watched on an iPad on a plane back from a corporate shoot last week. And yeah, I jumped. I like jumped in my seat on the plane a number of times. So yeah, thanks for embarrassing me. Opening credits too, very cool. Very cool framing and all that. Any questions? All right, then. You know where to find me. Like, subscribe, and watch Skinamarink on Tubi for free. But Tubi is going to have ads, right? Go out and find Skinamarink on like a paid subscription-based platform where you also don't have to watch it with the ads. Because it is really a movie that it's an experience. It's like an experimental museum exhibit almost through like a haunted house. So you don't want that to be interrupted with ads. You could probably go to your library and watch it on Canopy or rent physical media or something. So bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.